Okay, good morning, everyone. We still have some folks joining us, but we're going to get started. We have a lot to cover today in the financial and board training or boardsmanship training. You'll see it referenced both ways. This is a combined training, so it is 2 hours. We have the same training again on Monday night. So if you need to do half today and half then, that's fine too. I'll get the report of who was here when and see that you completed that. So that's not a problem. I'll go as quickly as I can, and hopefully it won't take us 2 hours. But I want to make sure that you get all the information, and so I scheduled it that way, and that you have some time for questions. When we finish covering the material, if you need to drop off and email questions, that's fine too. But what I do need for everyone to do as we start out is I'll put this in the chat again in case for the ones that came in after I dropped it. Sign up for the Blue Book. Put your information in the Blue Book for all local PTA board members and delegates. We need your information. But absolutely, the president, secretary, and treasurer we need to have your information, because that's a requirement by state law that we have you have all three positions, and that we have your information as a compliance issue. If you're an MCC PTA board member or officer, then there's a separate list. If you're doing both a local PTA and MCC PTA, then we need you in both places, because they're used for different contacts and reports. Okay. Also, I want to thank you all for coming today. I know this is a commitment, and I want to thank you for making that commitment to PTA and to our students, and giving your time and wisdom and experience. It's invaluable. I can't thank you enough for that. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and share my screen. Maybe, if it will let me. Okay. Artie is the incoming VP of Admin, and she is also on the call. Thank you, Artie, for joining us. And she'll be monitoring the chat, because it's a little hard for me to see while I'm sharing screen. And I'm okay at multitasking, but I want to make sure I don't miss any material here for you. So Artie, just feel free to jump in if there's something urgent. Otherwise, we'll address most of the questions at the end, because there's a pretty good chance that I'll answer your question. But put them in the chat so you don't forget what they are. Feel free to do that.
Yeah, and Laura, it seems on my end, it says chat disabled. So I don't know if you're the only,
Oh, okay.
because I know you did put things in the chat for us, but I'm
I
not
did.
sure we cannot.
Okay, everyone can participate in chat. You want to try that now?
Yes. Yep.
That
Perfect.
worked. Okay.
Yes. And good morning, everyone.
So speaking of the chat, if everyone would put your name, your role, and your PTA, and please don't abbreviate, because sometimes it's difficult to discern which PTA that is, if they have the same initials or similar. So put your PTA, your role, and your name in the chat, and sign up for the Blue Book, and we will get started. Thank you. So this is the financial management and board training for all PTA leaders, PTSA leaders. And it's important that we say that, because as a board member for any PTA or any nonprofit, you are responsible for what happens with that entity. So we offer this to anybody. Even members who are not on a board can attend this training, just as far as for Monday, if you have people ask. They can attend the training. Maybe they're considering being a treasurer. Maybe they're considering taking on a leadership role, but they're not really sure what's involved. This is a training that is pretty comprehensive and can help them understand the roles. That said, it may also scare them away because it seems very onerous. Most of it is, I think, common sense, but there's some intricacies there that we'll cover. All right. Of course, the mission and purpose of the PTA is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. All PTSA leaders, as I said, need this training, in my opinion. It's not required for everybody. It is required for the president and treasurer of every local PTA, and all board members for MCC PTA need to have this in order to be able to vote. If you're expect that you may occasionally have to designate someone else to serve for you at a board meeting to vote for you, then they need to have had that training as well in order to be eligible to sub in for you. So like a vice chair, if you're a committee chair, or something like that. I'm Laura Mitchell. I'm the current vice president of administration. Easy for me to say. I'm leaving at the end of the month, and Artie Baraneski will be our incoming vice president of administration. I will continue on with the compliance task force and helping get our local units compliant, meeting that. Some of you may be very new. Some may have been around for a while, but never really understood the structure, especially this little Delaware part over here of PTA. So National PTA is our parent organization, if you will. Oops, sorry about that, hit the wrong little roller thing there. Free State PTA is our statewide PTA. Then there's the council PTA and your local units. When you join a local unit, you get membership in your local school unit, the MCC PTA council, Free State PTA, and National PTA. That's included in your dues. As a PTA leader, you're going to pay your Free State dues and National PTA dues, and you're going to pay MCC PTA $1 per member is our dues amount. Now, right now, until the 30th of this month, your dues are $4.25. That includes Free State and National PTA. National PTA's dues are going up $1 at the end of this month. If you have members that you have not paid for yet this year, try to get that in before June 30th, because if you pay it on July 1st, even though it's for this year, you're going to have to pay that extra $1 per member, which you didn't budget for, you didn't collect that $1 for, you didn't adjust your dues. As a board, you should consider whether your dues are at the right price point to be able to pay that extra $1 going forward. So that's something that your membership has to adopt. So put that on your agenda for your first meeting to make sure that you set your dues rates, or if you still have one this year, to set your dues rates for next year. Now, for this Delaware PTA part, some of you may have been around, some of you may have heard bits and pieces, but not know the whole story, and I'm not going to get real deep in it. Previously, this Free State PTA was Maryland PTA. They sort of imploded just at the beginning of, well, it started before COVID, but at the very beginning of COVID, they really imploded. National PTA had to revoke their charter and sue them to get things back, and it's been a whole mess. Free State PTA was started in 2022, I believe it was, and they are our new statewide organization, but because you can't recharter with the same name, they are Free State rather than Maryland, but they represent us in Maryland. In that same time period, the IRS started revamping their group exemption rules. So that's like the umbrella organization for our nonprofits. The group takes on the responsibility of making sure that all of the organizations under them do all of their filings, their taxes are compliant, have a president, secretary, treasurer, do all of the things. That's why we have that compliance list, is to make sure that we are all meeting the requirements of the state and federal rules and regulations for maintaining our nonprofits. When they started revamping them, the IRS said that we're not going to issue any new group exemptions until we get these rules changed. Fast forward 4 years, we're still waiting, 5 years now, because they started just at the beginning of COVID. And so we're caught up in this loop where Free State came in after Maryland PTA, but can't get a group exemption for us to be under as the council and local PTAs. So they've made an agreement with Delaware PTA to be our umbrella for now until the IRS can issue or will issue new group exemptions and Free State can get theirs. There's been a lot of advocacy done with Free State, with the IRS from national and from Free State to try to get that done, and it's just not happening. We know the situation now; they're even more short-staffed, so I don't know when or if that will happen. That's why that Delaware piece is important because they are our umbrella organization, but Free State is actually overseeing us. Any questions about that? I know it's a bit confusing.
So,
Okay.
Laura, to confirm that this is being recorded and the recording will be shared as well as the slides?
Yes. Yes. And there are some additional notes in the slides, under the slides that you might find useful.
Great,
Okay.
thanks. That was one of the questions.
Sure. Yes. Okay. What we will talk about today.
Laura, can I ask you a
Yes.
quick question
Sure.
about the Delaware PTA?
Mhm.
If, and you might go into this later when PTA is not or is trying to get reattested, is how, because I think maybe it's more of a specific question to you and Artie, but the missing, if they're trying to re-up or make themselves active again,
Mhm.
how do they go about getting that information, or do they need to go? Maybe that's more specific. I'll ask that later. It's okay. Never mind.
Yeah. If someone has lost their nonprofit status, we will work with them to get it back. A PTA, they just need to reach out to myself or Artie. We'll continue to work on those together. There is a process for doing that, of course. You have to get your nonprofit status back. They will go to Delaware and ask them to include this PTA under their umbrella. They'll give us a letter saying that they're included, and then they'll be good to go. A very simplistic explanation of what needs to happen, but
Hey, Laura.
yes, they could still get under. Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in. I put this in the chat. I represent Cabin Branch Elementary up in Clarksburg, and
Yeah.
also the incoming treasurer at Neilsville Middle School in Germantown. But with Cabin Branch, we had initially been included under Delaware PTA's group exemption, as was expected. However, when we went to file our taxes, we found that that group exemption hadn't been processed, and we were actually not included under it. And we went round and round with Delaware PTA, and then one of their financial people who actually was with New Jersey PTA, not Delaware PTA. And the long and short of what we ended up finding out was that the IRS is actually not even approving new additions to the existing group exemptions. They're not approving new group exemptions, and they're not letting people under the existing group exemption either, which effectively meant that we do not have nonprofit status. So we pursued it separately to get our nonprofit status to the IRS because we were getting repeated messages about filing taxes, but we couldn't file our taxes because we didn't have nonprofit status. And
Right.
to be honest about it, Free State was not a lot of help and navigating that. They just kept passing the buck over to Delaware, and Delaware kept throwing their hands up and saying, well, we're trying. And then again, we got handed off to someone at New Jersey. And so I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who's experiencing that issue, because I heard there were 130 other schools in the state of Maryland who were all in the same category as us. And I don't know how many are in MCC PTA, but it was a real nightmare to navigate.
Yes. When Maryland PTA collapsed and National PTA revoked their charter, there was one person who has criminal charges pending in many places for many, many things, was left, the last person left on the board. She assumed the presidency and the building and everything else. She had to be court ordered to stop using the website and the name and all of those things. She essentially stole all the assets of Maryland PTA. And she sent a letter to the IRS saying that all these PTAs are no longer under our group exemption. And some got processed, some did not when we realized what was happening. She did the same with the state. They reversed all of them, but the IRS didn't. So if you log in and you still see Maryland Congress of PTAs, if it'll let you file, file. If you can't file electronically, let me know. We'll try to get our hands on I have collected a few of them, paper form, and we'll send it in registered. At least it's filed. They can't say it's not filed. And we are working on that piece too, because we just learned that was happening. The IRS, like I said, is very understaffed, and some of the PTAs did get processed under Delaware. And then I think they just stopped because who knows why. But so it's working for some and not for others. But if you're experiencing any problems like that, and I know I owe you an email too, Ethan, thank you. Please just reach out to us, and I will be focused much more on that task force. I'll have a lot more time to work specifically with individual PTAs after we transition our positions at the end of the month. I know that's not much consolation right now for those that are struggling to do this, but doing it yourself without the umbrella organization is a possibility. It costs a little bit of money. It's quite a bit more onerous each year. So you have to be ensure that you document and the process and what they need to do and following your successors, so that it doesn't fall off, because there's less of the oversight when you do it that way. You are still responsible for having all of those ducks in a row, checking all of those boxes and meeting all the compliance issues in order to use the PTA name. Okay, just so we're clear, even if you are not under the group exemption and you go and do your own separate nonprofit, and some PTAs have done that, you are still required to meet all of the requirements that we are going to talk about today. Okay, but thank you for that, Ethan. Okay, so we're going to talk about your nonprofit status, what that means, how you might risk it or avoid losing that. Fiduciary responsibilities of the board, what's your personal responsibility and liability, duties of the treasurer, budget development, principles and procedures for the financial management contributions, review a few of the financial forms, and your loss and crime prevention. There's also some additional slides at the end that might be helpful for you, but we may not get to those today. So the basics for your 501c3, your nonprofit tax-exempt organization, you've gotten your letter, and I'm using this loosely. Hopefully you still have your designation letter from the IRS. If you've had good record retention and record keeping, even if somebody kept every single piece of paper ever, that's better than if they threw it out, because we'll get to the retention schedule. You are required to keep some of that information forever. Okay, we'll tell you exactly how long you have to keep it, and I will send out that records retention schedule after the session. You're organized as a 501c3, exempt for paying income tax on most things. That does not mean you will never pay income tax or be required to pay. It depends on your activities, and we'll get into that. But you must make sure that all the earnings are for the benefit of PTA, of the organization, not to a private, that enormous word, not to any one stakeholder, not to a board member, not to a member. This is a reason that like sunshine clubs and things like that have to be separate, where you send flowers to somebody in case of a tragedy or something like that, or an illness, because that is inuring benefits to an individual member. Okay. And you cannot attempt to influence legislation, i.e. lobby. That's a little bit different than advocacy. It's a fine line. but make sure that you're on the right side of that. And we'll talk about more about that. So what does all that mean? You are, as I said, exclusively for charitable and exempt purposes like education. That's generally just the schools, but we fall under that as well. You'll need to look at your IRS determination letter, try to find that and keep that in your permanent files. Never, ever throw that away. Even if you have lost your status at this point, we will try to get that back. If we can't get the previous organization reinstated as a nonprofit, then we'll help you restart under a new name and start fresh. You should still keep those other files because they may need to look back at that in order to get you established again. We're going to talk about some fundraising and programming guidance as well. Your exempt purposes, education, relief of the poor. Oops, sorry, jumped ahead. Poor, the distressed, or the underprivileged, advancement of education or science, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, and combating community deterioration and juvenile delinquency. So that's where we fall in there. And you cannot do any political favorites. You can't do any campaigning. You can't do anything that benefits one candidate or indicates a preference for one candidate versus another. Okay, if you have an event, you've got to invite everybody. They don't all have to come, but you have to invite them all. And your lobbying has to be insubstantial. Lobbying is that you are trying to get specific legislation passed or have some specific policy changed that you are going to legislators and trying to do. Advocating, like at the Board of Education or even at the state or federal level, to support legislation that someone else has put in, to throw your support behind it is fine. Like I said, it's a very fine line to tell the difference. But as long as that's not like your sole activity that you're doing, you should be okay. You can do some lobbying. It just has to be very insubstantial. Okay. And this gets into the difference. I think I just covered that, but you will get the slides as well. And if this last one, the charitable assets in perpetuity, if you raise money as a nonprofit, that money must stay with a nonprofit organization, no matter whether you continue or not. So if your PTA dissolves, you have to donate your assets, all of your, and for most of us, it's just cash, just money, not property or anything like that. It all has to go to another charitable organization. Our bylaws designate that is Free State PTA. So in most cases, if a nonprofit ceased to exist, you could donate it to any other nonprofit you wanted. Our bylaws require that that goes to Free State PTA. So if someone says, let's change to a PTO, you have to forfeit all of your funds to do that. And you don't get the support that we have with PTA. Okay. I apologize, my clicker is not cooperating with me. So you want to be careful about those hidden dangers, the enormous lobbying, political activity, unrelated business income, we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and failure to file the required forms and returns, which is a catch-22 when they're telling you can only file online, but you can't file online because we don't have this piece. So now you didn't file, and we're going to take your nonprofit status. That's what why we're working with local PTAs to make sure that we can get that straightened out, or try our best. We are working with the IRS, so we're doing our best. The reasons to be a tax-exempt organization: you're eligible to receive tax-deductible contributions. You're exempt from federal income tax in most cases. Possible exemption from state income and sales and employment taxes. I don't think any of our PTAs actually employ anybody in Montgomery County. And reduced postal rates. Most of us are not mailing things anymore either, but it's there. The thing you have to know is that your PTA is a business. It is a separate entity from the school, from Free State, from MCC PTA. It is your school PTA's company, if you will, right? And it should be treated as a business. It's not personal funds. It's not for personal preference and use. And of course, you come up with ideas and you advocate with your fellow board members and your members to approve doing an activity or doing something to benefit the school, the students. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that is not your checkbook. It is not the school's checkbook. They are separate entities. The school does not run the PTA and should never run the PTA. The principal or their designee is one of your board members per your bylaws, but it is for the benefit, your PTA is for the benefit of the students and the school, okay? Not an individual at the school and not at the direction of the school. That they have one vote via the president on the board, and that's it, okay? Obviously, the better your working relationship with your principal, the more successful you're going to be and the more support you'll be able to provide for the students. But that is our goal. Our students get what they need. And you must comply with all local, city, state, federal regulations and laws, of course, and remain focused on your mission. Okay. That will usually keep you out of most issues. The executive committee are the ones that are starred there, the president, secretary, and the treasurer. Your vice presidents are also, those are the required ones, the ones that are starred. Your executive committee includes your vice presidents, but if you don't have vice presidents, maybe they're not in your bylaws, maybe you can fill the positions, that's okay. But in order to be compliant and to be a legal nonprofit for state and federal laws, you have to have a president, a secretary, and a treasurer. Most of your bylaws say that those are elected positions that continue they may be term limited a year or 2 years, whatever that is in your bylaws, or until their successor is elected or appointed. Okay, so generally, yes, the president can stay on after their 2 years if there's no one stepping up to do it. Right? You don't want them to be on for many, many years. The reason there are term limits on there is so that people don't get too comfortable in a role or start to not follow all of the requirements, or in many cases we've seen where a president and a treasurer stayed on for many, many years and learned how to do things behind the scenes that others were not aware of, not always legal. We'll put it that way. Your board of directors is much broader. So you should know the difference between your executive committee and your board of directors. All of these are included in your board of directors. What's a fiduciary? Okay. You're the keeper of the trust. That includes trust to do the right thing, trust to do the money, trust to manage that, and trust to keep the nonprofit status and follow the laws. So you're in charge of the well-being of that PTA. You need to be both ethical and legal. That's the responsibility as a fiduciary, as a board member, and executive committee member that is your responsibility, whichever one capacity you're serving in. You have agreed to do what's right by the kids. The bold part there is really important. As the board of directors, you are individually and collectively responsible for what happens with that PTA. And it doesn't matter if you attend the meetings or not. If you are on the board and you don't, for instance, go to meetings, that is not a defense. If the board does something wrong or illegal or fails to do something that they needed to do, you can't say, well, I didn't attend the meeting, so I didn't know. That is not a defense. You're on the board, you have agreed to do that position, you're still responsible for finding out what happened in that meeting and what's going on with the PTA so that you can stand up or report if need be, if something is not being done or is being done wrong or you're concerned about it. You should bring that to MCC PTA or to Free State PTA, National PTA if need be, or the authorities. Okay, if it's going really wrong. So your responsibilities as a fiduciary are threefold legally. There is a fourth one in there, and that's one is the duty of care, to pay attention to the organization's activities. That means you're responsible for what happens whether you go to the meetings or not. You should know because you're on the board. As I said, if you don't know, that's on you. It's not an excuse. It's not a defense. The duty of loyalty. This one is important. To put the interests, they're all important, but put the interests of the organization before your personal and professional interests. And that loyalty is to the PTA, to the students, not to a president, not to anyone else, no individual, but to the organization and maintaining your PTA for the benefit of those students. Just to be clear, that's the loyalty part. Same with the obedience. It is to comply with the applicable laws and your bylaws. Those are your guiding light, your bylaws. Most of the questions that we get or that we see on the listserv can be answered in your bylaws. If you don't have your bylaws, let me know. We'll try to track down the latest version or get you a new version passed so that you have those, and every member should have them, but every board member should have them, and they should be on your website so that anybody can go and check them. And it helps to keep a check on your activities and say, hey, I'm not really sure that this falls within our mission, or this is, we didn't get the proper notice for this meeting, so we need to do something different. People love and hate rules, but it is the guiding document that helps everyone know what it means to be on the PTA, what's the requirements. And a lot of times people don't volunteer for positions because they don't know what's involved. The bylaws can help with that as well. Okay, this is, again, with that accountability. You can delegate responsibilities to a board member, another board member, to a committee or a chair, but that does not relieve you of your oversight responsibility. You are still ultimately responsible. Okay, so delegate, but don't abdicate. Just saying, oh, well, I gave that to them to do. I don't know what happened with the book fair. It's not my problem. I assigned it to so-and-so. No, that is not a defense either. You are still responsible, so you need to provide that oversight. All right, any questions in the chat already? Before I move on?
No, not right now.
Okay, good. All right, treasurer's basics. And I'm going to try to go through this thoroughly but quickly. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them if we haven't by the end of this section. It is quite a bit. And please don't think that I'm not a treasurer, so I don't need to pay attention to this part. If you are on the board, you need to pay attention to this part because remember, you are ultimately responsible as a board member for what happens with that PTA and their funds. Okay. First, review your bylaws, financial guides, training materials, anything that's left from the outgoing treasurer, plan your transition, know when you're getting the financial review and when you'll get the books. Do not take custody of the books until they have been reviewed by somebody else. Do not start writing checks. Do not start taking on the treasurer's duties until you have, or as the new president, taking those books and start doing things financially until you've had a financial review. That protects you and it protects your predecessors. You want to make sure that everything is balanced and everything is accounted for and that you have good records before you assume responsibility and possession of those books.
Huh? I can't help you right now. I'm on a call.
Okay, if you're, could everybody
you
please,
mean?
could you please mute? Artie, let me make you.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to make Artie a co-host so that she's able to mute. Apologies. Okay. You'll need to file new signature cards at the bank that for your new officers. That generally requires a letter signed by the outgoing treasurer or signers and saying that they are turning those funds over to you and the custody of that account over to you. And the new signers will all need to go to the bank generally at once, although some are more flexible with that since COVID. They let you come one at a time if you're working with a specific person. If you're going to change banks, then you need to have membership approval for that and follow the procedures to do that. The Financial Review Committee will make recommendations if they have any. If they see that, well, I didn't have documentation for everything, you need to do that better next year, or try to find what's missing in here so that you're compliant. But make sure you get all of the prior documents, previous files, whether they're electronic or paper or both, and that you have what's required in the permanent records. So there's bank statements and financials, those you need to keep. So make sure that you receive them before the other person is off to high school or graduated and they're gone and you can't reach them. Try to get everything before the end of June, maybe even before the end of school if you don't have any other transactions to do. Make sure you pay your insurance before the signers change and the books are in review and all of that, because if you pay late, there's a fee and you're not covered. So make sure that right now you should be paying your insurance to AIM Insurance. Okay. Let's move again. Some tools that the treasurer will need and use a lot. Of course, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but you notice the bylaws and standing rules, if you have standing rules, are critically important. Financial guides, I will provide that for you, the one from Free State PTA. If you think something sounds questionable in that guide, or it's not what you have understood to be correct, please reach out. There are errors in that book. It's been revised a number of times, and there are some issues with it. I'll just say that. But by and large, it is a great guide for you in keeping your books correct. Okay. And that annual financial report is going to be critical. Make sure when they do the financial review, you get that report and that you keep that report in a safe place, and then in the front of I will just say in your binder or your file for next year, because you're going to need that ending balance to do the following year's financial reviews. Okay, so always keep that, and your membership has to approve that report. So those are important things to keep.
So
Most of these.
There is a question about the financial review that they were told that it was not due until October. So how does that work with the new officers coming into the role?
Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a minute.
Okay, great.
It's the financial review is required at the end of every fiscal year, and when there's a change in the treasurer or any signer on the bank account. So if you have your treasurer, your president, and your VP, one of your VPs, as a signer on the account, and the VP leaves, quits, moves, whatever, they're a signer on the account. You have to do a financial review at that point, even if it's October, 1 month into your school year, you need to do a financial review, because you want to make sure that everything is as it should be and everything is balanced and accounted for at that point, because you're going to ask someone else to be the third signer on your account, And they should never assume responsibility for that until they have a review that says that all is well. Right? So the report that is due, that financial review report, is due in October, primarily because our fiscal year ends June 30th. School's out. We're not having PTA meetings. Right? We're not doing a lot of financial transactions. So you do the financial review as soon as the fiscal year closes on June 30th. So soon after that as you can, round up 3 people to do it for you. And then your membership has to approve that. So that means you have to wait until September, or in some cases October, because a lot of people do the back to school night as their September meeting. So oftentimes it's October before you have the membership together to approve that financial report. So that October 31st deadline is to upload that report into GiveBacks to provide it to Free State for the reporting. But your review should be done as soon as the year ends, even if the same signers are all staying on and will continue into the next year. So you have no change in signers, but you still have an end of a fiscal year. So you need to do that financial review. That's going to provide the information you need to do your tax filings and your other fiduciary reports. If you wait and the new fiscal year monies get all commingled in with the prior fiscal year money, it's a little bit harder to balance that out and figure out, okay, what was outstanding on June 30th, but now it's cashed on July 1st. Which year do I count that in? Where does that go? So it's much cleaner if you just close your books at the end of June, have the financial review done in the first couple of weeks, or sometime in the month of July. And then August is when you start thinking about your back to school events and all that, and you're going to start preparing for that. But that's the other reason I say now is the best time to make sure all your dues are paid, make sure that you have paid your insurance premiums for the year, because that will allow you to continue to do work or do back to school events, things like that, in August and September, before you have that first board meeting to be able to approve anything. It's also a good idea to already have a budget approved before the end of the school year, so that you can do those things in the summer. It can be changed at any time, but it's a good idea to do that. We'll get into that more with the budgeting piece. I hope that helps. Okay, most PTAs in Maryland operate on a fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. Some, with all the debacle with Maryland PTA and all that, when the group status was revoked for individual PTAs, some had their fiscal year changed by the IRS, or somewhere along the way it got changed. It is pretty simple to move that back. I've linked to that form when you get the slides. It's IRS form 1128. It's a pretty easy task to do to change your fiscal year back. But it may require another financial review if you do it like mid-year. So it's a great time to do it, since you're already doing one June 30. Then you will have that information to do that. And all of our PTAs in Maryland, I think all PTAs, period, operate on a cash basis. What does that mean? We don't have accounts payable, accounts receivable. We count money when it comes in, and we count money when it goes out. We don't say, oh, but we still owe this, so I have to record that on the books. When it's paid, it's recorded in the books. When it's received, it's recorded in the books. So we just did the Celebration of Excellence for MCC PTA. We have some sponsorships. If those funds come in before June 30th, they'll get counted in this year as income. If they come in on July 1st or after, they're going to get counted in next year. We still met our obligation for raising funds for this year's, to offset this year's expenses for the event, but it may not be recorded in the same year. You count it when it's in hand, essentially. Your duties, toolbar's in the way. complete the training with either Free State Council PTA, which is what we're doing here, or National PTA e-learning. They have a Thrive section. I highly recommend that you go on National PTA's website. You do have to create an account. You have to sign up. But I highly recommend you do that as an individual. It's the one place I'll tell you not to use your position specific emails. Sign up as an individual. You have access to so much information and training and ideas and grants and programs like School of Excellence and reflections and things like that, that you may never see an email for if you're not in there. If something comes up in your PTA and you have a question, can we do this, or how do we do this, or what does this mean? That is a wonderful resource. They have so much on there. So I highly recommend checking that out. And you can do training on there, and they'll give you a little certificate at the end. I will send you confirmation that you've completed the training here so that you have that to upload as well, if you need to, and give backs and things. The treasurer will also chair the budget committee, if you have one, to help prepare and monitor the budget throughout the year and let the board know and the membership know if you're over or under in a category, and adjust your budget accordingly. The budget is a wild guess, right? Scientific wild guess. But because it's based on your history and your best estimates, you may know that you have a new sponsor coming on next year, so you budget for that. But most of it is based on your history. Like, how much do I budget for the income and the expense for the book fair? Well, look at where you've been in the past. It's a little harder right now. That means you have to go back a little further sometimes because COVID messed with everything, right? So just looking back 5 years may not give you the full picture, but what you've done since then should be pretty helpful. We're getting further out, so you should have enough information to make a pretty good guess. But that will be your responsibility as treasurer. You must give a written treasurer's report at every meeting, whether that's and upon request. So for general meetings, board of directors meetings, and executive committee meetings, and for the annual financial report, you do the budget to actual, like, here's what we budgeted, here's what we've actually received or spent, and the difference, so that you can spot that you need to make a change before you have to pay for something and you're out of money in that budget line. That's the reason that you have to do that each time. Pay all the authorized PTSA financial obligations. That means that 2 people have approved it, at least 2 board members, executive committee members, whatever your level of requirement is. Collaborating with membership and fundraising chairs, you need to make sure that they understand how to account for cash if they're taking in cash at an event, how to verify that. So 2 people counting the money and signing the same form, and it's recorded on a cash receipt form. When you do things online, you don't have the same thing. You don't have 2 people there to hand count money. You don't have any money to count. It's all online. But you need to make sure that you're using a platform that gives you a good report to say how much came in, right? And make sure that when you're paying, you have great backup on what you paid it for, who you paid it to, how much it was, and that everything matches up. Okay.
So quick question, Laura, in
Sure.
the chat, you mentioned the additional training. So individuals are asking if you could repeat the resource name and also the link for the additional training, if there is one.
Okay, yeah, it's National PTA training Thrive group. So it's pta.org.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks. And Thrive is the section of that page where they have now put all of their training. And for a while, when they first made that move, they couldn't generate those certificates to say that you did this training, that training. They can do that now. You get a certificate at the end to prove that you completed the training on their website. Because anybody could tell us that they've done the training, but if we don't have anything to put in the file or to prove that the people that are required to take it have, then we really don't have a rule or enforcement on that, because how do we know? Yes, we want to trust, but we also have to verify, because it's on us if you're a board member and you're helping steer our expenditures and processes, but we don't have any evidence that you took the training that our bylaws say is required, then we're not in compliance. So, maintaining your your records in an organized fashion, permanent records, financial review. As I said, we'll get to the schedule. I think it's coming up very soon, the retention schedule. These are pretty straightforward.
Laura,
yes.
Apologies. I have another question for you on the prior slide. So I had been told and operated under the assumption with written treasurer's reports. So like I generate an income and expense report, but I had been told not to share that. Okay.
No,
That's the
that's
guidance I've
public
been operating
information.
under. It was odd to me having prior experience in nonprofits. So we're clear. And I guess the other question is, can we send that out? Like when we send out our meeting minutes to the membership, can I send out the income and expense report too?
It should be a part of your membership minutes. The
Awesome.
treasurer's report is delivered at the meetings, and it should be part of the minutes and shared with the membership. It's their money that they've contributed. It's a membership organization, so they have every right to know the financial status and where the money is going, and how that's where it's coming from and where it's going.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Now there are different levels of the budget, and we'll get to that as well. And you probably don't share the line by line, but you want to share like the overall overview. That's the categorical budget. Okay. Important parts here are all checks have to have 2 signatures. I will tell you, banks do not all banks check anymore. When you print your checks, make sure you get 2 signature lines on there. That's an indication to somebody who's taking a check that, hey, there's supposed to be another signature on here. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't take it. But if you have a loss, a financial loss, and you go to your insurance and you're not getting 2 signatures on every check or every expenditure, they may not cover your loss, or maybe not cover all of it. Right? If you're not doing all of the things that you need to do to make sure you're watching for any discrepancies and wrongdoing. So they may cover, like, for instance, 1 month, somebody starts writing checks and signing them with the 1 signature and they're getting cash somewhere. Maybe even 2 months until that's reviewed. But if that's ongoing and you discover it a year later and you weren't doing all the follow-up and checking on these things, they're probably not going to cover anything past 1 or 2 months, because you should have caught it. If you were following the rules and regulations, you would have seen that, and it would have been stopped sooner. So you're going to limit your how much you're able to recoup from your insurance. That doesn't mean you still couldn't do it civilly, but if you're not doing all of these things. So 2 checks. You can use debit cards now and credit cards if you do one. There are a lot of cautions that go along with that, and that's in the financial guide and in the policy. I will provide that as well. But you still need dual authorization. You still need 2 signers on the account to say, yes, you can use the card for this purpose. At the council level, we do 1 blanket approval at the beginning of the year for the recurring charges, like our website fees, our listserv fees, phone, or internet, things like that. Anything else has to be separately approved by the signers on the account, and it has to be budgeted before we can pay it. So you've got 2 layers of coverage there. It has to be in the budget, 3 actually, because it has to be in the budget and the funds have to be available. And you have to have 2 approvals. They can be by email. I suggest that when they review the statement at the end of the month with the signers, that they sign it hard copy, just sign the email to say, yes, that was approved. But that is not a requirement at this time. So the same thing, whether it's an e-check, debit card, or credit card. Keep all your receipts, bank statements, cancel checks, deposit slips. I tend to write on the deposit slip what it was for. if I'm doing 3 different things at once or they go in different categories. Maybe I have a school store. I have apparel that I'm selling, and I have tchotchkes that I'm selling, and drinks maybe, or snacks, something like that. I'm going to keep those funds separate. So it just makes it easier for the treasurer oftentimes, but that's something you need to work out. But I write on the receipt, okay, this deposit was for the apparel. So that gets credited to that line so we can keep the income amount straight. This deposit I did separately. That was for the snacks, and the other one was for whatever else I sold, the tchotchkes. It helps with the budgeting to know whether you brought in as much as you anticipated or if you spent more than you brought in, right? It helps you to know whether you want to continue to sell that item or continue that activity. If it's all just deposited in one lump sum and you don't know where it belongs, it's difficult. Also, when you do your fiduciary filings, they ask you the categories of like, where did the revenue come from? What's it for? And what were your expenses for? What category do they go in? So all of that is really helpful. If you get a detailed listing of how much of that deposit was for each of those things, that's fine too. Whatever works for you, but you should keep track of those incomes, the income and the expenditures, and where they belong. Forward your state and national dues to Free State PTA monthly. As I said, do that very quickly if you still have outstanding dues, and some of you do, and deliver all records and passwords to your successor. Passwords are critical. We highly recommend that you have position-specific emails so that transfer of information and access history of conversations or activities is transferred, because it's all in the email. So you may end your term and move away, and then something comes up and someone says, well, the prior president contracted with me to do X, Y, and Z, and I did, and now you owe me this money. If you have no information about it, you have no access to their email or the conversation that happened between them, or any of that, you have no proof that you owe them, and you could end up in court if they're willing to go that far and say, go after you for the money, but you have nothing to say that you did or did not contract with them. So you can do that with Google. You can do president dot your school name or abbreviation at gmail.com, or you can have maybe part of your website, or however you want to do that. But we highly recommend that you do that so it's easily transferable if you give them the passwords. Same thing with givebacks. We have a lot of people who cannot get into their givebacks accounts because no one gave them the password when they set it up. They never used it. They forgot to give that. Keep a running list of what accounts that you're using, not a written necessary list of passwords, unless it's password protected too. But keep a list of all the passwords you need to give to your successor, so you can do that. Okay. The forms that you need to, and there's the pro tip: pass on your passwords. Getting into Maryland Business One Stop to get to your state filing and all of that. Getting into the IRS account, you need to make sure that you have all of those passwords and logins. And immediately change the passwords when you come in. You don't want to leave that the same as it previously was, because it's easy and everybody will remember it. You should change that to protect yourself. Preparing and submitting your forms. This is really critical. Everybody must file a 990 every year. Which form you file it depends on how much money you bring in. Okay. So the postcard only is if you have gross receipts less than 50,000 average over a 3-year period. So maybe you get some big grant one year, but you didn't have it the year before, and you don't get it the year after, you still don't have to file. That's a 3-year running average. If you're getting 50,000 or more up to 200,000, then you'll file the easy. And I need to talk to you because I want to know how you're doing it. And for the gross receipts over 200,000, you need to do the full 990. The 1099 or 1096 is very uncommon. If you're hiring an individual, not a business, if you're hiring an individual and paying them more than $600 in the year, over the calendar year, then you're going to need to issue a 1099 to them. So the IRS knows that they were paid money to provide a service or goods or services. So this is really uncommon to have to do that, because mostly when we're paying somebody, we're hiring a company and they're incorporated. They're required to file, to record all their income and that. So it's not terribly common, but you should know if that happens, and to at least take a look at whether or not you're required to do that. The Maryland tax filings and organization registrations, you've got your annual financial report or COF 85. You may hear it called either one, or exempt organization fundraising notice. That too depends on the volume and your money, which one you file and which 990 you file. So essentially the 990 postcard online one is really easy if you're under 50K, but it doesn't capture all the same information like your officers and how much of your income was spent on administrative versus mission specific expenditures. So this COF 85 is going to ask you for all that information anyway. You end up providing it one way or another. State sales and use tax forms. If you have that designation, have that certificate, then you'll need to file that form. That's the one that lets you purchase things without tax. So, and it's a separate filing. You have to request that separately. Just being a nonprofit does not give you that. And that is your sales and use tax number. It should only be used for your PTA's purchases, not another PTA. You can't use the school's nonprofit number, all of those things. That's yours and yours alone, and you shouldn't share it, and you shouldn't borrow someone else's. And that's all I'll say. It happens, but that's all I'll say. And the annual report for personal property. We don't have personal property. We don't, own vehicles that we run around in. We don't own. Some may have a computer, but they're generally not significant enough to reach the threshold here. We don't own or any property, real property or anything like that. So that's generally zero, but you still have to file the form and say that you don't own any personal property. And of course, your insurance renewal and payment, which I've mentioned a few times. All right, here's the records retention. Basically, your articles of incorporation, all your financial reviews or audits, any IRS documents, so that's your determination letter, reinstatement letters, revocation letters, anything you get from the IRS is a permanent record and should be kept. Insurance records, so your payments, your claims, anything like that would need to be kept forever, and your minutes. Your minutes are permanent records. Don't say, oh, these are 50 years old. We don't need to keep these anymore. Yes, you need to keep those. Okay. Other things have various levels of retention. Budgets and financial statements for 10 years, 7 years for receipts and disbursement requests of bank statements, things like that, and 1 year for deposit slips and bank reconciliations. My bank reconciliations are usually with the statements, so I generally tend to keep those as well. But the requirement is 1 year. All right. Now for the budget. Just the basics on the budget. There are several ways that you can structure your budget. And one is a line item and the other is categorical. We highly recommend that you do the categorical and the line item, because they're shared at different levels. So the line item is every single one, like fundraising. You're going to have your t-shirt sales. You're going to have your book fair. You're going to have your spring fling and all the other things that you do as separate lines, because that helps you recognize, again, whether that's a profitable or a worthwhile activity, or if it's supposed to be a fundraiser. If it's just something that you do, like your back to school picnic for your incoming families or your returning families, then you're going to need to know what that activity costs, not have to tease it out of a whole bunch of other, some melting pot of expenses later. It helps you with your future budgeting and others that come behind you. Like, hey, they used to do this picnic. We haven't done that in years. Maybe we should do that and, kind of bring people back together, but I have no idea what to budget for it. So they can look at that and get some ideas and, account for inflation and all of that. But that's the level of detail that your board is going to approve. That line item, every line, because they may see some activity and they're like, well, I happen to know that the cost of the dye for the color run that we've done for 3 years just doubled because we did one at another organization I have. So that's not going to be enough money for that activity. Or, we have a lot more students and I think we're going to make a lot more money, or maybe we need to adjust what we're charging, things like that. That's board level. The categorical budget is the one you're going to share with your members. You can show the line item like that so they know what's in each category, but what they're approving is the category. So they're going to approve the fundraising. They're going to approve the administrative costs. They're going to approve staff and support, things like that, or all arts and culture, mini grants, something like that. Not every single line. Why is that important? Because I'll use the beginning of COVID as an example. Many of us had administrative costs, and one of the lines in there was postage and printing. When COVID hit, we were not allowed by our bylaws at that point with Maryland PTA to have virtual meetings. So many of us had to go and stand in parking lots, socially distanced, and do a meeting to prove some budget change to be able to do anything for our families as they struggled through the beginning of COVID. Even accept grants from National PTA to help us with various things, whether it was technology or mental health or whatever it was. We couldn't take it until we budgeted. So we had to meet in the parking lot. If we were able to move things around within that line, or that category, we could have taken money from another administrative cost, like maybe we weren't doing, I can't even think of something else that would have been in there, but to move it to postage, because Maryland PTA said that you had to send written notice to all parents of any or all members of any board meetings to move money or to approve budget or amend a budget or any of those, many things, do elections even. We didn't have money in postage to send to all of our members. We had money in other lines in the administrative costs that we could have transferred, but we had a line item budget. So the membership had approved the individual lines. We couldn't move it without a membership approval, even as a board. At another PTA I was involved with, that I was president of at the time, we had done a categorical budget. So we were able to just have the board meet in the parking lot and approve a budget transfer from one line in the administrative category to another line so that we could send out those notices to the members. Other PTAs weren't able to do that. So it's important, for instance, with fundraisers, maybe you make more on one fundraiser than you expected and less on another. You could shift those monies around because you have more participation, your expenses were higher, whatever. You could shift it around within that category of fundraising without going back to your membership, the whole budget again. Does that make sense? Okay. I can address any questions on that, but it is important that members are able to see all the lines, but what they're approving is by category, the total amount, so that you have some flexibility within that account as a board. Okay. When you're setting up your budget, this is the way that charitable form is laid out, and I do recommend that you follow kind of this structure to the extent that you can, because it'll make it easier for you to fill out this form at the end of the year when you know which of your revenues are sales of inventory. So your t-shirts, right? Which of them are gaming activities? Maybe you're doing a bingo night or something like that. You're going to need that separately. And these can just be separate budget lines, even in the fundraising category. So keeping them, structuring it sort of like this, or at least, similar to this, and know that you're going to have to calculate these numbers if you don't, can help you out a lot and make the end of year stuff a lot easier. All right, formulating your budget. Lots of people, I hear them talk about a summer budget. I never, ever recommend a summer budget just to cover those summer months. Because what happens is that if you do that, you're approving a budget that will last you maybe through September. So what if several of your board members happen to move over the summer, or something happens, or they decide they can't do it because they have some other, their circumstances have changed. And come October, you don't have enough board members to approve a new budget. You can't spend any money. You can't pay your bills. You can't do anything until you have those positions filled and can approve a budget with the new amounts for the rest of the year. You only have what you budgeted for those months. Technically, that is your annual budget when you pass it. Even if you only accounted for 3 months of expenses, you're just going to come up really short. So my suggestion is, and what I typically do is take our actuals. So all year long, you've got your budget and you've got your actuals that you're tracking. There may be variances and you may have amended your budget. That's why I say look at your current budget where after all your amendments for the year and your actuals, and basically copy that over to the next year and make small adjustments like, oh, well, our color run was way more successful than we expected. Our book fair kind of fell off. So we make those adjustments for the upcoming year and then approve that budget for the entire year before your current year ends. Now, people will say, well, then this board is making the decisions for the next board and saying what they can and can't do, what they have. To some extent, yes, but they can amend it, right? They can, when they come in their September or October meeting, they can amend it when they have their membership meeting. It's very easy to do, but you have an operating budget to work with and do the things that you need to do until you can get to that point where should you lose a member or two off your board, you can still operate. Look at your historical budget trends and your future plans and priorities. And you should have your elections done. And that's one of the reasons they're suggested to be done in May, so that in June you can work with the incoming and the outgoing members to look at the budget, talk about plans, what do they want to do, what do they want to add in, and take that to your membership for approval. So it's sort of your budget and sort of their budget. It's a combination. Again, with your priorities and goals, make sure they're aligned with the mission, list everything out, and work with your principal on your school improvement plan. Those are done and reviewed over the summer and adjusted, and make sure that what you're doing is in line with the school improvement plan. If they're saying, we need to do more math activities and we need more reading opportunities, things like that, you might do something like a readathon, or you might do something like getting books donated or projects like that. So that's a good place to start to look at, what are you going to put in next year's budget? Yeah. Estimate your revenues, and it's better to underestimate your revenues. Don't say, oh, so-and-so, the school down the street made $6,000 on this activity, so we're going to budget $6,000. If you budget $6,000 in revenue, you're probably going to budget $6,000 in expenses. Make sure your expectations and your budget is reasonable, and that you don't spend the money before you make the money. Don't go and spend like you're going to have every single student participate in the school and then only have 50% participation, because your revenues are not going to cover your expenses. So underestimate your revenues and overestimate your expenses. Error budget conservatively. And these are some of the things that you'll include in there. Carryover funds. I always get questions about carryover funds. Carryover funds are, we rarely spend everything that we budgeted in a year. Some things just don't happen. Some things cost less than we expected, or whatever the case may be. And you don't really want to spend everything that you have in your bank account on your way out, right? Or as you end the year, because what are you going to have for startup? So there's going to be some money left. Let's say that you have $1,000 left in your account at the end of the school year. When you're doing or nearing the end of the school year, when you're doing your budget for the next year, that is money that's available to you. So you can budget that, you can include that in your carryover funds. It's not revenue, because you've already accounted for it as revenue, but you'll have a line that says carryover funds. Like, what do we have left? Just like your checkbook at the end of the month, right? You don't start out at zero every month. You carry over what you ended with. So this is essentially the same thing. And we're going to take a quick break real soon here, so everybody can do their stretch their legs, take a bio break. Your expenses, things you need to account for, and that's the insurance and your dues are required. Other things, some you may have, some you may not. Make sure you put a little bit aside for bank fees. If you're taking credit card payments or whatever, that could be where you put your charges for the swipe fees and whatnot. Or you may have a separate category for that and only keep the bank fees for return checks and things like that. That's a call that you'll have to make. And again, here's the carryover funds. How does that work with an expense? So when you do your budget, your income and your expenses have to balance. If you don't do carryover funds for your expenses, you could say, we're going to have $10,000 come in and we have $1,000 left over. So our income is going to be $11,000. Our expenses are going to be, we've estimated $9,000. Well, I'm off by $2,000. My budget doesn't balance. So you would have a line in your expense, below your expense line. It's not an expense, but separately, to balance that carryover funds, what you expect to carry over into the next year. So it's the difference between what you expect to come in and what you expect to spend. You would expect to have that going forward to the next year. And that makes your budget balance. Any questions about that part? Okay, let's see. Like I said, your budget has to balance. The budget adoption process, it's continuous loop. You want to formulate the budget, get the budget approval, and that includes the board level, and then you take it to your membership. Throughout the year, you're executing the budget, but you're also providing oversight and back to the formulation of adjustments and amendments to the budget if needed. Okay, because it has to be budgeted for you to spend it. The membership must have approved it for you to spend money. Okay. And a couple of cautions on this. We're almost done with this section, then we'll take a break. You cannot cover school responsibilities. So basic school supplies, capital improvements, contributions or other organizations, funding of school personnel, and this is a tough one. It gets a little convoluted. Janitorial supplies, things like that, school and office equipment, playground equipment, presentation equipment, teacher development, technology, principal's discretionary fund, teacher salaries. You have to be really careful with the personnel part. Right? If you are contracting with We don't have to pay for the use of the facility anymore for schools. I don't know if you guys got that word, but we are no longer required to pay for that. You work with your principal to reserve the school when you need it, or whatever. If it's a different school, you need a bigger school, for instance, then you would work with that principal, and probably yours too, to reserve that space. But you may be required to have security. You may be required to have building services on site or afterwards. That may be an expense that you have to pay, but you are not paying them directly. You are paying CF, the Community Use of Facilities, CUPF, Community Use of Public Facilities group, for those funds, or for through your school. The staff are getting paid from the school. If you start paying them directly, the IRS can say that you are an employer, and then you are on the hook for not just their share of Medicare and Social Security taxes, but also the employer share for withholding taxes, for doing all this. And most of us do not have the expertise to do that. And you could get in a lot of hot water for not, if you do that incorrectly. So it's best to just not hire staff directly. They also have rules they have to follow through MCPS and what they can do. Be very, very cautious about that. Now, if you're donating playground equipment or a sign or something like that, AIM has a form that you do to make sure that they take ownership and responsibility for the function and the maintenance of that equipment. You're going to want to do that as a separate line, a separate fundraiser, a dedicated line for, let's say you want a new sign out in front of your school. I'll get to you in just a second, Narissa. You want a new sign in front of your school, and you hold a fundraiser specifically for that. If funds are donated for a specific use, that is a restricted account. So you need a separate budget line in there, and it has to, all the money raised for that purpose has to go in that line. All the money raised for that purpose has to be used for that line. And it would require the approval of the donors and your membership to use that money for anything else, even if it's leftover money. So you'll need to go back to, that's why you have to keep really good records of where this comes from. Narissa, you had a question?
Yes, good morning. So to clarify, here's my question is related to the last item, which is teacher salaries.
Mm-hmm.
What if we want a teacher to start an after-school club?
It gets very murky there. Okay. You could do a mini grant process to fund the club operations, which in their proposal may include a stipend for them. If it's over $600, then you're in that 1099 category. It has to be very clear that they are contracted, not employed by you. So you're going to need to lay that out very carefully. Or the school may give them a stipend. Most of them do for an after-school, for leading an after-school group. And you could do the mini grant process for the costs related to supplies or whatever they need for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so Laura, to follow up on Narissa's question, there were a couple of related questions that popped up in the chat. So around teacher development, does this include extra supports? Are we allowed to reimburse teachers for extra classroom needs? The previous board had a fund for this.
So yes, I suggest using them. Yes, so I suggest using the mini grant process. At one school, we had a standing amount that each teacher could request, like $100 for the year. Not everyone did, but it always had to go through the principal. Principal needed to sign off that they were approving whatever the activity was, number one, and that this was not something that was in the school's budget already, because oftentimes they would ask us to purchase things and it would go to the principal for approval, and the principal would say, well, we have a budget line for that. The school's buying, already buying that. You just have to ask us for it. So now they know that there's a line for it, and now the school knows that the staff member needs that. And the PTA is not spending their money on something that's already been budgeted through the school. So that process, I think, is very helpful in teasing out what those items are. And you also have to make sure that it is, if it's calculators or, chargers for the calculators or the Chromebooks, something like that. Well, I won't say the Chromebooks. Let's say you have specific calculators you're using in a calculus class or something, but they require chargers, and those tend to walk away. That is something they could do a mini grant for, and there's not a lot of liability or responsibility there. If you're buying something like ceiling fans or something like that, when those are installed, I had this at a school. The PTA bought ceiling fans because many of the rooms on the lower floors were steaming hot. They had them installed, but they never took the step to turn that ownership and responsibility over to the school as required by our insurance and by the school's insurance. So what happened was, when the fans got wobbly because they were loose, that happens after they turn for a couple of years, maintenance would not tighten them up, would not fix them. School would not let anyone else come in and do it, because then they were in the school working on things that were connected to the school electricity and all of that. And they were too wobbly to use. They weren't sure they were secure. So we had these fans hanging in the rooms, and we couldn't turn them on because they were afraid they would fall on somebody and hurt someone. Reasonable? Yes. Avoidable? Yeah. If they had done the part where they turned the ownership over to the school and the responsibility for it, the school would have been maintaining them, and they would have still been able to use those fans. So that's a really good example of why you want to do that. And if you are writing a check to the school, let's say to supplement a field trip, so students who might otherwise not be able to go, or participate in an activity, then you want to make sure that you are using the AIM form, which I will also give you, that says to the school, we're giving you this money for this purpose. We need the receipts back. I'm sorry. We need the receipts back, and the funds have to be used for this purpose by this date. Otherwise, you have to return the funds, to make sure that the money is being spent in accordance with your member approved budget, or that it's returned to the PTA if not. So if you follow the rules about it and do the documentation, you can do a lot of these things, but you can't just write a check to the school and not get any backup for it, or not get any specifics about how it's going to be spent, and not have any follow-up on the fact that it was spent as intended. All right, so it looks like we have one more slide, and then we can take a break.
Yeah, and there are also, I think, finish that slide. There's several questions in the chat related to the mini grant and cautionary funds, but I think finish this slide first.
Okay, yeah, and I do have some templates for the mini grants too that you can make your own and use those. It's much easier. Never just write a check out to the school for discretionary use. As I said, gift money directly to the school rather than purchasing the item yourself. That avoids that part about having to. This is a picture of the form. It's hard to read, but you'll get the sample form for the gifting letter that says, okay, we're giving this to you, and it's now yours. And the school signs off on it, and they have a specific account they're supposed to put money in that comes from donations. So that I think it's 2025 account, something like that. It's on the form. So it says that we're giving you this money for this purpose, and you buy those things, and then they're yours. You own them. You're responsible for maintenance and liability on them. Okay. Monetary donations should use that grant process and the gift letter. Always use a hold harmless agreement when you're donating property directly to the school. So if you're buying picnic tables or a sign or anything like that, there was an incident 2 years ago, I guess, with a student who leaned against a sign at Montgomery College that was not properly grounded and was electrocuted.
Oh my gosh.
You do not want to give a school a sign and not have this hold harmless. They're going to have it installed, or whoever you buy it from is going to install it. They're going to own it. They're going to maintain it. You do not want that to come back on your PTA, right? If something happens 10 years down the road because it was not maintained or somebody did something that made it improperly grounded or whatever the situation is, this is now school property and school responsibility. And you need, part of this letter is that hold harmless part says it's no longer our responsibility. Okay. And having your principal approve those grants, as I said, is the best way to make sure that you're not supplanting school funds. You can supplement, if it's not budgeted, they need crayons, or they need paper towels or toilet paper or whatever. Those are typically school funds, but sometimes they run out, and things happen. And if it's in the benefit of the students to have it, you can follow this process and support the school in that way. But the reason for going through the principal is to make sure they're the ones with the most knowledge and the approval, the ability to approve it, the budget, and what's what's there and what's not. Okay. All right. I am going to stop sharing for a moment, take a few questions, and then we'll take well, we only have about 30 minutes left. So maybe just a quick 5-minute break, and I'll answer some questions while we're on break.
Yeah.
I'll keep it recording so you can hear it. If you need to walk away and take a break, go ahead.
Great. And I think some people unfortunately had to drop off early, but let me see if I can. So first question, is something like IXL considered technology?
I'm not familiar with that one. It sounds like software. That is typically a school expense. If it's something that's being used for a club, for instance, then, could use the mini grant process. The other thing that you have to be really careful about with that is that it's equitable, right? That it's serving most of your kids as equitably as possible, your students. So, sometimes you get a request for a mini grant from a grade level teachers, first grade, for instance, and they want to get the weekly reader. That's benefiting all the first graders. If it was one class, I'd have to think twice about that. But if it's for all the first graders, then fine, use your first grade grant money for that.
Right.
But I'd have to know a little bit more about IXL
Yeah.
before.
I mean, I think IXL is a math
Okay, math site. So
math site. And I know, and I don't know if it's across MCPS. I know like at our son's middle school, Holly Wells, they do have IXL. So I'm guessing, I don't know. Jessica, do you know, does your school offer it, or is it something you would want to have offered?
This is Erin. I actually
gonna
posted
say-
the original question.
Yeah.
It was for the reading version. Our school already has the math version that's used, and then the staff asked for us to support part of the cost for adding the reading version that is used by all students in the school.
okay. So have you talked with the principal about it?
The principal made the request.
Okay. So if it's in your budget, you have the financial means to do it, I would use the mini grant process. I'll send you those forms. Everybody on the call will get that. And I would definitely use that to to do that process. But make sure that it's budgeted. You may have to have your membership approve a budget amendment to cover it, or you may have the funds in the category to cover it.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. And then I think some of the other related mini grant questions. So do any schools have 2 mini grant cycles? Is it recommended? And
Yeah,
you-
I actually think that's a good idea because you have what you have in funding at the beginning of the year, and you can estimate what you have to put in mini grants. As you go through the year, other things, opportunities and activities pop up for the spring, and you have a better handle on what your fundraising has done for the year, and compared to your expenses, so you know where you are more financially. You have a better idea on that. You're more clear. So yeah, I think if you have the funds to do a second round, or maybe you didn't get a lot of participation in the beginning, in the first round, just have 1 or 2 grants and you still have money in your mini grant line item. Some do it on a rolling basis. They just keep it open. They can apply throughout the year, but they have their caps and their limits. But I would always recommend a statement on there, as funds allow, right? So you're not saying we'll definitely do this, and they all have to be reviewed and approved. So you might need a mini grant committee to look at those. But you want to make sure that it's benefiting many students, not just a small number.
And then, thanks, Laura. I think the next 2 questions are kind of related. The first is, why can't we use PTA funds for playground equipment or upgrades? And then if we give a grant to the school to cover an item as opposed to paying for it ourselves, do we still need the insurance form to turn over ownership?
If you give the money directly to the school, you're doing a directed donation, just like someone may do to you. And you're going to use a different form, but yes, you need that form to say, this is what the money's for. And it has to be spent by this date for that purpose, or you have to give it back. That eliminates the opportunity for the funds to be donated for one purpose, used for something else, and never getting receipts or anything like that, right? It reserves your right to get your money back if it's not spent the way that it's supposed to be, because that's what your membership approved. That's how it should be spent. As far as the playground equipment, I recommend AIM Insurance recommends that you donate the money to the school with membership approval, and not buying the equipment yourself. It's just that extra step. But if you do buy the equipment, make the purchase yourself, you must use that form, because playground equipment, kids get hurt on that all the time. And you want to make sure that your PTA is not exposed to liability for any of that, and that it's maintained by the school. So you have to turn over that membership that ownership, to the school and get that hold harmless signed. And they have a process that they have to go through for doing that. So, they have to get approvals as well to accept that.
And let's see. So I think you've covered this, but can you provide info on the mini grant process? Currently, teachers can submit directly for up to $100 once per year.
Yeah. So at the first school I did this with, at elementary school, we had a grade level grant that was like $500 or $600, depending on our revenue for that year, and our balances. And that was typically used for their field trip. Mostly they used it for the bus for their field trip. Again, you want to donate that to the school and let them get the bus. Don't get the bus yourself, because if something happens, you're exposing your PTA to risk. But you would donate that money to the school with the express designation of being used for field trips. And the schools also have an independent activities fund, discretionary fund for assisting students who can't afford to pay for a field trip and things like that. So just so you know that. if you, oh gosh, I forgot the other part of the question. I'm sorry. Oh, the $100. So
Yes.
we also had grants that teachers could apply for individually if they had, they wanted the weekly reader for all of the first grade or for their class, or they wanted to do some STEM experiment or activity that they could request funds for that. And we had a cap that was similar for that, about $100. But using the process, using the forms, we would ask them to present to the membership about what they did, what the outcomes were, what they got out of the activity, what the students got out of it. And we would reimburse them with receipts, or we would donate the money to the school with the express purpose of using it for that activity. So that, and it went through the principal for approval. So we didn't give a teacher money to go out and buy stuff that the principal hadn't approved them doing. And now they have stuff they can't return. We don't have any money, and the activity never happens.
Okay, so
Never, 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 ever, ever give cash. If by cash you mean that you're just giving them a check, that's one thing. But never, ever give cash, and you should never give just a. You could do a flat amount for all teachers, but they still you need documentation. That mini grant process gives you that documentation, and they're agreeing to give you the receipts back when they request that mini grant. So there are some requirements in there that protect you and your record keeping.
right, so the short answer to that question is no, that
Yeah.
it shouldn't be providing cash and they do need a receipt.
Yes.
And then the forms, I think there's a question about if the forms are needed, if cost has already been incurred by the school.
If the cost has already been and then you're reimbursing the school, is that what is happening, Maddie?
Yes, yeah. We don't give cash advances to the school. So the school secretary, in coordination with the principal, is giving the actual receipts, with the check that the school issued to the vendor. And I'm just issuing a reimbursement like I would issue, a parent a reimbursement. So do we still need those
That's fine.
forms? Okay, great.
Well, what is the money for? Is it an activity or equipment or typically?
In this case, it's the activities. So, the bus, like the school paid for the bus for the fourth graders to go downtown, and then a couple of weeks later, I got the reimbursement request, but I didn't send them any sort of form, also because it had already happened. So, I didn't need.
Yeah,
So.
but people can still come back like up to 2 years and say such and such happened. They stepped on a nail, or this happened, or that happened on that trip, and then we had this incident, or these expenses, medical expenses, or whatever. I would still do the hold harmless if it's used for anything that anybody could possibly sue over, because they can sue for anything. We don't want to make you paranoid, but you want to make sure that you're covered in every way that you can. Okay, let's.
There was one more question earlier, Laura, that was about the bylaws and if they could be, I guess, amended in the middle of the year.
Yes, your bylaws are required to be reviewed and amended and approved every 3 years, but you can do that at any time, just like your budget. It can be amended at any time. Okay. All right, I am going to do a speed racer through the rest of this. Let me get back to Zoom. And whatever we don't get to cover today, somebody give me a 5-minute warning when we are nearing that. Whatever we don't get to is still going to be in the slides, and you can email me questions. You can stick around and ask if you're able to, whatever. Okay. Principles and procedures. Your bylaws are your governing document. Read your bylaws, follow your bylaws, use them early and often. Okay. And the treasurer is the custodian of all funds per your bylaws and under duties of officers. So work only with your approved budget. It's got to be authorized. You need authorized signers on your bank accounts. You must have two. You should have three. And then you're going to need somebody else who is a board member who is not a signer on the account to oversee or review those books monthly, your bank accounts versus your reconciliation and what's on the screen for your bank account. So you want to make sure that you have that and that two people are signing every transaction, whether it's a check or, with a debit card or something like that. Never, ever, ever use cash or write a check out to cash or petty cash. If you need startup money, you should, and I'm going to say this because these are the rules, you should write a check to an individual and cash that check, and that be your startup fund. Typically, people will just use their money as their startup fund for like the book fair or their change fund, and then take it out at the end. That is not supposed to happen before you count the money, because two people who are counting the money at the end are supposed to account for all the money and write all that down. You can deposit it in and then get your check reimbursed for the startup money, or you can get the money up front to go get the change for your activity. But it should not be just used cash and, pay or a check made out to cash. Cash and cash equivalents. You can use gift cards. Okay. Gift cards are okay, but you have to account for them in the equivalent of a check register, right? They usually have some kind of number on them you can track. You need to make sure that you're keeping track and that when you give that to somebody, they're signing something to say that they have it, so that there's no question in the future that from anybody that you bought, $500 in gift cards and never gave them out to anybody, used them for personal use. You don't want to expose yourself to that. So just treat them like checks. They're cash equivalents, because whoever holds them it belongs to them. They can use it. So you want to track it the same way. Checks should be endorsed and deposited immediately. Cash should be deposited immediately. If you're having a 5-day book fair, you have to deposit the money every day. Don't wait till the end of the 5th day and then do it, because where's that money stored? It shouldn't be kept at the school. It shouldn't be kept at the home. There's too much risk there that it'll be lost or stolen by somebody, and you're putting yourself at risk to be robbed potentially, depending on the size and exposure of your book fair. Take the money to the bank and deposit it every day. It'll also help you with your reconciliation at the end of your book fair. And I know it's a pain, but you should. Yeah, so when somebody gets the gift card, you need to have them sign. There's a lot of discrepancy about how much that can be. The MCPS folks have rules about how much they can receive. I believe it's like $20 in a year. So if you do one at the beginning of the year and you're doing something else at the end of the year, make sure it's not over $20, or they're going to have disclosure requirements and other things for individual teachers. The IRS basically just says essentially a small amount, which is not defined in that same section. It's defined elsewhere, but what they mean is $25. So your gift card can be up to $25, or the school limitation if these are going to teachers. Okay. Credit cards, you must have two people signing or emailing that it's authorized from an email that to be theirs. Make sure you can prove it. As I said, I would have them sign it when they do the reconciliations and review the bank statement each month, if you're doing a lot of that. And we would highly recommend you use two-party authentication. So like where they text you the security number and you put it in to get into the bank account, or to spend out of the bank account like that. You must have tight controls on it, and 2 approvals per the bylaws still apply, as I said. The statement and the receipt should be reviewed by a non-signatory and board member. So just like they're going to review the statements, the bank statements and reconciliations, someone who's on your board but is not a signer on the account. So that prevents helps to prevent collusion between two board members or two signers on the accounts to do nefarious things. Essentially, it's the same thing for electronic banking, whether you're sending an e-check or something like that, you've got to do the same, you've got the same requirements. And you can use remote deposits for your checks. So where you take the picture of the check, it gets deposited into your account. So that can help with book fairs if you're getting a lot of checks as well. Okay. Receipts and deposit, make sure you always have two people counting the money and verifying it on your cash verification form, which is in the cash and the financial guide from Free State, which I will send you. All checks must be deposited immediately with for deposit only on the check. You can do it remotely, or you can do it, in person. You've got to, if you have cash, you've got to go to the bank anyway to put the cash in. Can't do that remotely yet. They'll figure it out sooner or later. And deposit all monies daily. Never put money in a school safe. It could get confused with who that money belongs to, or get lost or whatever. You should keep track of and possession of PTA money, but it should not be ever be deposited in personal bank accounts or school bank accounts. So if you're trying to use Zelle or some of those cash apps and things like that, you can't hook that to a business account, which is what you have. You have to use a personal account for a personal use program. You cannot have that money go into your account and then transfer it to the PTA. It should never touch a personal account. So you either have to sign up for a business account, in which case they charge you fees, and you may as well use like the give backs or one of the others, or not use it. So don't use a personal account for any reason, any means. And you should not keep money at a member's home. Nobody should take it home with them. It should go to the bank. Talk to your bank about getting a thing for the night drop, a bag for the night drop, or you can purchase one. Put your account information and you'll have your deposit slip in there. Never pay bills or reimbursements in cash. You always use your checks. Everything must be authorized. I think I've beat that one to death. And record them in your account books, whether you're using Excel or you have software, and in your check register, to make sure that you have those funds recorded, and you don't not balance at the end of the month ago. Where did that come from? Wait, I'm off. Why? Your books must balance, so you have to record everything. And your school cannot use your PTA as a pass-through. They cannot get a grant from outside and give that money to the PTA, put in their account, and then have you pay the expenses for them. That money was granted to them, and it needs to go through their school account. It breaks their accounting rules, and it is not a legitimate activity for you to do, because now you're going to have to report that grant money as income and as an expense, and the grant was not to you. I think I covered all this, except for authorized signers on the account cannot be related or live in the same household. Okay, so you can't have a parent and child, or spouses, or cohabitators. If it's your parent or your parent and a grandparent in the same household, they cannot be the signers, and they cannot there, because they're related and they're in the same household. So either of those cannot be signers. One can be, the other one cannot be. You need other signers. Tracking all your receipts and everything in your accounting books, making sure that those are accurate, reconciled every single month. And when they're reconciled, your president, your treasurer, and whoever that third non-signer is need to review it and make sure that it's accurate and sign off on it. If that's not done and you have a loss, your insurance will likely not cover it. So what's the point of paying insurance if you can't recover losses because you didn't do all the steps? So quick bookkeeping.
You're at 5
options.
minutes, Laura.
Thank you. TechSoup is the place you can get some discounted programs. Treasurers must report, I think I hit this earlier in answer of a question, you must give a written treasurer's report at every meeting and upon request. And that's public information. Okay. All the board members have a fiduciary responsibility. It's your responsibility to make sure you know what's happening with your PTA, that you're on top of it, you're following it, and that they're following the rules, or you can be personally responsible for it. So make sure you're paying attention. If you're on the board, watching what they do, attending the meetings, looking for those records, those reconciliations, all of that. Just some information about merchant services and what you can do and not do. Real quick on these contributions, never say that your donation or your membership or whatever is tax deductible. You say it may be tax deductible because you don't know their financial situation, whether they've maxed out on charitable donations or anything like that. Just to cover yourself, you say, we're a 501c3 nonprofit and your tax donation or your donations may be tax deductible. And in fact, it says are here. They should say may. I used to have it crossed out and changed, but I don't know if it'll do that. Here it is, may be tax deductible. Consult your accountant, right? Let them figure out whether for their circumstances it is tax deductible. You are an exempt organization, but their personal circumstances determine whether that is actually deductible. Always issue a receipt for an acknowledgement for any donation that you receive, especially if it's over $75. If it's over $75 with goods or services, you must give them an acknowledgement for their charitable donation. Now, if you're holding an event, the tickets are $100. The dinner is, let's say it's a dinner, the value of the dinner is $50. That requires an acknowledgement because they gave you over $75. But your acknowledgement is going to be $50 for the dinner and $50 charitable donation. You have to subtract the value of whatever you give them back. If it's over $11.10, and I don't know why it's such a weird number, but that's the IRS number. So if you give them a coffee cup that's worth $6, you don't have to deduct that. If they gave you $20, they get a receipt for 20. Yeah, but I recommend giving acknowledgments regardless. So that number actually changed. It went down to $11.10 instead of $11.30. It's based on inflation and other things. And some information you want to look at when you have to do what for charitable contributions and forms to file and all that. I don't think too many of us are getting donations over $5,000, but it could happen. Quickly on your financial review, you're going to need 3 people. You have to do one, as I said, whenever you change a signer on the account and at the end of every fiscal year, 3 people to review it. They're looking for backup and accuracy and the numbers all match and everything balances. If you have an accountant do it for you, you don't need 3 people. You just use that accountant. And that satisfies your AIM insurance policy to make sure that you can get coverage if you have a loss. Audits are not required unless you get a lot of federal money or have over 20 grand in receipts. I think it's 20. And it's basically just an annual, a lot of people are scared of it. It's really just an annual bank reconciliation. What did you start the year with? What came in? What went out? Does it balance at the end? Does that match what's in your checkbook and on your bank account? So it's pretty straightforward. And then the AIM insurance information is all here. So make sure that you take a look at that. And then there's some other supplemental information, and I am done. Whew.
Thanks, Laura. That was a marathon.
Yes. Yes.
So,
okay. I am happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer questions if you have some. Yes, you do get donations sometimes of large amounts. Maybe somebody is letting their nonprofit go and they have to give it to another nonprofit, so they give it to the PTA. Maybe you have a very generous donor in the community or something. So yes, it happens, but it's not common.
yeah. So
most of our
question
PTAs.
about the signers. They're two sisters. They're both board members, but they don't live in the same household.
No, they're still related. Cannot do it. They can both be on the board. They can't both be signers on the account.
And there was another question.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. If you want to stay on and hear the questions, and that's fine. If you need to run, I understand. This was a marathon.
Yes. And I think you answered this question about the book fair. So they say that they lock up the money in PT envelopes in the school safe each evening. Sometimes a fair closes after bank hours and definitely reopens the next morning before the book fair opens. I mean, before the bank opens. So they wouldn't have cash to run the book fair if everything is deposited.
Yeah, the change fund is, yeah, that is a thing. And that's what I typically do to get around that is use my money as the change fund because I'm holding my money each night, right? The rest I put in the drop box at night. You get the night drop box zipper pouch or a lock zip pouch that you can buy online. I don't know too many banks that give them out anymore. They're usually out of them, but some do still have those bags, and you don't need anything for the night drop. You just drop it off. But I mean, if you bring in $1,000 in cash, do you really want to be responsible for that, even overnight? Or you add that up over your 5-day book fair, you know, you could have a significant amount of money that you don't want to be responsible for. Yes, there will be additional meetings. These we just wanted to get these in, because we have some PTAs that are restarting and needed to have this in order to do that. But also we have a lot of new leaders coming in, and we want to make sure that they got a good start into their year. In the fall, there will be an in-person training is the plan at this point with all kinds of opportunities for training. If you have a specific training that you're interested in having, please let us know. Something else that you know are interested, secretary, what do VPs do? What about fundraising ideas? Things like that. We'll have all kinds of opportunities at that in-person training. Then this will definitely be offered again and again. Free State offers it periodically, and it is available on National PTA's website in that Thrive section.
Laura, this is Keisha Martin Riley. I had a question about gift cards. What if we are given gift cards to raffle off?
You're going to record those as income, and you're going to start a spreadsheet or something to track them, just like somebody gave you a $50 bill to raffle off.
Perfect.
Okay. You're going to record that incoming. You're going to record it going out. You're going to have somebody sign for whoever won it. Have them sign that they received it.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
It's CYA. It's all about CYA.
Yes. So I think Nidhi had the same question that they often get gift cards as gifts to be given to the teachers that are collected from parents and businesses for an event. And that would be treated as received and recorded, right? And then
yes,
when it's given, and then exit when it's given to the teacher so that there's clear documentation of when it came in and when it went out.
Right. And where it came from and where it went to.
Yeah, and where exactly.
Yeah. Because again, you don't want give anybody any opportunity to say that you did something improperly. Susan.
Right.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for everything.
Hi.
Question about the annual financial review.
Mm-hmm.
So books are closed end of June. The financial review is done, let's say, in July. And assuming the PTA has a budget in place, whether it's a summer budget or the next year's annual budget, is the PTA allowed to spend any money before the general membership approves the financial review report?
Yes. Once the review is done, the board should review it and approve it, and keep those minutes. And then you would do the same thing with your membership. And I'll tell you a little trick in a minute for getting those done. Same with the bylaws. As long as it is budgeted, your membership has approved that budget, you can start to pay your expenses and do financial transactions once that review is done and the books are returned.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then
when-
sorry, go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was going to say with this, because you need the minutes and with your bylaws, for instance, you want to get those done quickly. What I typically do is schedule a regular meeting and a special meeting for the same night. I hold the special meeting to approve, let's say, the budget or the bylaws. We go through that. Minutes are taken. They may be handwritten, but they're taken. And then we close that meeting and start our regular meeting and approve the minutes from the special meeting. Then it's all done in one night, right? You can't approve minutes for a meeting you're still having, so it has to be a separate meeting. So you just call a special meeting, you do that business, you close that meeting, you start a new one, and then you approve the minutes from that one and you can get it done. That was a big thing as we ended the year and people had bylaws due for compliance. Well, I only have one meeting left. How do I do this? That's how you do it.
Right. And then Susan has her hand up, but before that, because it ties back to earlier question about the two sisters, that they can't be signers on the bank account, but could they sign like reimbursement requests, cash verification forms, and the monthly bank statement reconciliations?
Yes, one of them could be the non-account signer who's reviewing the bank statements. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because then you still have that personal relationship that could cross lines, and I would get an independent third person to sign the review and reconciliations. As far as signing cash verification forms and things like that, yes, they can still do those. They can sign off on. I wouldn't say necessarily authorizing someone else to be reimbursed, but if they're asking for a reimbursement, then they can sign it because you're going to have others review it.
Great, thanks. And then Susan, you had your hand up.
I asked her question and I answered.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Did we miss anybody's questions in the chat? And if so, apologize. I've been trying to keep up, but these are all great questions. And the other thing, if you do have questions, please email the VP admin account. And so Laura and I are gonna work together to create some FAQs as well.
Yes. And I'm putting this in the chat, but we will have more training in the fall, possibly over the summer. But you're always welcome to email and ask questions. I'll give you the VP admin email and as well as mine. It will switch over from me to Artie at the end of the month, thereabouts, maybe sooner, maybe depends on how long it takes me to clean it up. I haven't been in this role as long, so the VP of advocacy, that took a long time for me to get through. It was 3 years worth. Okay, so email that one, and this is my personal. If I could type, which I apparently cannot. So if you need anything, you have questions, you're looking back through the materials, or I failed to include something I said I would, or it doesn't make sense after you get it, feel free to email, and we'll get back to you to help with that. And encourage other board members to take it. Like I said, I think it's a great idea for everybody to take it and know what they're responsible for and what they should be looking for. But at least one member of your executive committee needs to take it. I prefer that the president and the treasurer take it, because a lot of things happen because others don't know what they're supposed to be doing or looking for or watching for. All right. Looks like we have all the questions.
I think so.
Let me stop the recording.